Mural right here on the Dark Lady, a bar here in downtown Providence, will soon be completely removed after the bar issued an apology to the community. Now, the controversy began after the painting started to receive online backlash. The mural was simply meant to be a tribute to Iryna Zarutska, a woman who was killed in North Carolina last summer. But some have started to see it as a political message leaning towards the conservative side.
So when I see a story like this breaking, and by the way, it is absolutely ridiculous, obviously we all know that, I'm reminded of a campaign that was initiated in the 2010s, and essentially it was a bunch of individuals that were handing out or putting up on a university or in a city, and it ended up spreading nationwide, flyers that read, "It's okay to be white." Now, this flyer just looked like this. This is an example of it. I'll put it right up here on screen for you guys. And essentially the point of putting up these flyers in different various locations was to prove something that we all intuitively know to be true, that whenever the left talks about white privilege or white nationalism or white supremacy or anything, again, that has to start with white and then is a bad thing, what they're actually angry about is not the suffix, the privilege, the supremacy, or anything of the sort. What they're actually angry at is the prefix, the white. That's the problem that they have, and that campaign was a stunning success in revealing that, because people were absolutely outraged by the idea that anybody would say anything remotely positive or even neutral. Again, "It's okay to be white" was the phrase about white people. And this example of the Iryna Zarutska memorial that has to come down in Providence because supposedly it doesn't reflect the values of Providence, Rhode Island, is a perfect distillation of that concept, because as you guys may have known, Iryna Zarutska is that Ukrainian refugee who was murdered in Charlotte, North Carolina by somebody who supposedly had different mental illnesses, had a lengthy criminal history, and he just stabbed her for seemingly no reason, even though, again, after he stabbed her, he made commentary about her race, and she died, again, on the train alone and terrified. And by the way, this video was absolutely shocking to the public when they saw it, and one of the things that was most heartbreaking is that after Iryna was stabbed, you could see her looking up with absolute terror on her face, not even understanding what happened, before again, she bled out on that public train. And again, this moved a lot of people, so they started putting up murals of her, and the idea was this girl was a refugee of the Ukraine war. She came to the United States of America, and soft on crime policies ended up leading to the perpetrator being able to be out on the streets in order to kill her. But because she was a refugee and not a regular ordinary white person, you would think that the left wing, who has those Ukraine flags all up in their bio, would not be offended by us trying to honor this individual. But it turns out white trumps absolutely everything, especially when an innocent Baba Angel black person who is just trying to feed a starving family happens to be the killer. And this is why there is a move across the country in order to eradicate these privately financed murals to Iryna. And the example that we have right here features not only the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, but also his primary challenger, another Democrat that's also a representative in Rhode Island, who have decided that this cannot stand. It must be taken down. And even though it's privately funded on private property, it cannot be allowed to stand in Rhode Island, because white people don't matter. White people are the problem, and white people dying is not a tragedy in any way, shape, or form. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
A lot of people voiced their frustrations, and voices were heard, and the work is coming down as a reaction to that.
Gaudreau says after online backlash surrounding the politics of the project, which wasn't finished yet, the owners of the Dark Lady want it removed.
And I want everybody to know that my intentions with the mural was to lower the temperature.
So this segment is really disgusting. On every level, it absolutely is. And a perfect example of this is you have the artist, the guy who's painting this mural that was privately funded, having to go to the local news media and essentially explain that he's not an evil white racist. And the reason he has to explain this is because Democratic Party politicians who absolutely hate and can't stand free speech have decided to make this a campaign issue. And again, it is so unambiguously a left-wing thing that both candidates are in favor of eradicating Iryna's image because they find the idea of honoring a white victim of criminal justice reform, releasing a black criminal who should have never been out on the streets in the first place, against their values, fundamentally opposed to what Providence, Rhode Island stands for. And again, nothing could be more absurd, and it actually breaks my heart a little bit because for those of you who are unaware, I actually got engaged in Providence, Rhode Island. It's actually a beautiful town, but the thing is, like many places in this country, despite their historical significance, despite the beauty of actually being there, despite the fact that they have coffee milk, which you Rhode Island people didn't realize that I knew about coffee milk, I absolutely do, they end up ruining it with terrible governance. And again, it's both candidates that are likely to be the next mayor of Providence, Rhode Island that want this mural eradicated because white people don't matter. White lives are absolutely worthless to them. And again, these are the values of Providence, Rhode Island, according to both candidates running for mayor. But I also want to point out something else that is incredibly obvious because I mentioned that this is on private property, it's privately funded, and this runs in stark contrast to the Black Lives Matter murals, which by the way, they had them in Providence, Rhode Island, that are paid for by the taxpayer, or all these ridiculous art installations that we talked about in different various parts of this country that are just meant to be anti-white in whole. And guess what? They're consistently paid for by the taxpayers, including that statue of the fat black woman that probably looks like she works in the DMV that was allowed to be there. But if you do something privately, you're the enemy. You're the problem. And again, Iryna did nothing wrong in her life. She was a refugee to the United States of America. She was holding out a job in the United States of America. She was taking public transit, which allegedly these lefties want you to do in the United States of America. And she was murdered, and still her life is worthless to these individuals. In fact, it's worse than worthless because it can be used against their political agenda of releasing criminals over and over again. So they want to eradicate these ideas from the public square. So of course, the left launched a hate campaign against this particular mural because you never ever can remember a white person who was murdered by a black criminal. That can't be the case. That can't be allowed. That can't be permitted. They're all about targeting you because remember, whenever they say white supremacy, white privilege, or anything of the sort, their problem is with the white. That's what they have an issue with, and they're making that clear with this particular stance that they're taking. And again, them putting pressure to remove this particular mural, which by the way, wasn't even complete at the time that they decided that it needed to be eradicated.
The mayor's office told us he didn't have time for an interview Monday, but shared his statement, saying in part, "The murder of the individual depicted in this mural was a devastating tragedy, but the misguided, isolating intent of those funding murals like this across the country is divisive and does not represent Providence."
So again, this is the statement from the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. He didn't have the time to get an interview. He was probably smart enough to not appear on camera in order to be saying this. And he releases a statement and he's like, look, it's a tragedy that that lady was killed. It's sad that she died. But the fact is, we think your intent in your financing of these private murals runs against our values, so it must be removed. It is divisive. And yeah, Providence, Rhode Island is not going to stand for any kind of mural that ends up depicting a victim of criminal justice reform, which we also want to institute in Providence, Rhode Island. It's disgusting. It's reprehensible, but they're just so bold about it. They're so open about it that you're not allowed to do this. And again, this is meant to chill freedom of speech because that mural, that artwork, is freedom of speech.
We are seeing a right-wing movement that is exploiting the death of a refugee for the purposes of trying to spread division.
State Rep David Morales, who's running against Smiley, is in agreement with the mayor on this topic. It's no secret that you and Mayor Smiley haven't seen eye to eye on a lot of issues. Why do you think your opinions align on this one?
Ultimately, we want to make sure that every community member that calls Providence home feels safe, and we can both agree that this mural behind us does not reflect Providence's values, nor does it reflect the creativity that we want to see in our city.
So again, we have this guy who's probably running to the left of Mayor Smiley talking about how, oh, it doesn't make people feel safe. How does this not make you feel safe? Does seeing a white person depicted really affect you that badly? Are you that pathetic of an individual, Representative Morales, who's trying to be the mayor of Providence, that a white refugee who was murdered by a black criminal makes you that uncomfortable? Again, do we need to replace it with more creative stuff like the fat black women statue statues, the DMV representatives that we are paying for by the taxpayer in all these different locations across the country. Shame on you. It's absolutely embarrassing. And again, when the taxpayer ends up funding it, they're totally fine with it when it's politically divisive and meant specifically, by the way, as an attack on white people, calling white people evil, white, and racist. This guy, again, will support it with your own tax dollars. He'll force you to pay for it, but if something private goes up, if something that doesn't cost a single taxpayer dollar ends up going up, then he has a problem with it. Then he'll team up with his arch rival, the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, in order to attack it. And again, he repeats this line that we've heard from the mayor, that we hear from all these different Democrats, about how it doesn't reflect our values. It doesn't reflect our values. And again, when they say things like this, you need to take them at their word, because their values are letting that criminal go. Their values on letting him stab her up in the train. And this is a reminder of the consequences of their values. And this is why it needs to be eradicated. This is why it needs to be wiped out, because they're not in favor of this. Again, they want to let the criminal go. They want more Iryna Zarutskas to die, and they want you to just shut up about it and accept it as a punishment for your evil white racism in the past, which again is even more absurd because Iryna Zarutska, Ukrainian refugee. She does not descend from a long line of people that own slaves. In fact, she's Slavic, meaning the word slave is literally derived from her ethnic group, but Morales over here cannot let that stand. He needs it to be wiped out. And again, he calls out the artist's creativity. What the hell has this guy ever done in his life that's of value? Like, I get that he's wearing a questionably colored suit right there. That makes me question a lot of things about him. Maybe he doesn't like that particular billboard because it's of an attractive woman. Maybe that's his actual issue. Maybe if you made it 12x more gay, he would actually like it. Maybe that's what's going on here. But other than that, what has he done to ever be creative in any way, shape, or form? What has he ever contributed? He's a worthless state representative, an absolute scumbag who again is selling racial division and trying to be more anti-white than the current mayor in office in order to assume that office. And I wish there was a better candidate. I don't know the political situation of Providence, Rhode Island. I'm assuming because it's a left-wing place in a left-wing city in a left-wing state that you don't have a lot of good options. But in case you do, in case there is a Republican running, this alone should be a reason to vote for said Republican. Because again, if they don't want you to ever show a victim of black crime, what do you think they're going to do when that issue pops up, when they're in charge of your city, when they're in charge of your police force? It's absolute scumbaggery in every possible way. And again, there should be more outrage. This is yet another example of that it's okay to be white kind of thing that really gets under their skin. And in addition to that, the artist has no attachment to these politics. He's made it clear over and over again. He's just doing a job that's financed by private donations, but it doesn't matter. They're perfectly fine smearing him. And this guy smeared him as a crap artist. The mural looks fantastic, as well as an evil white racist, because Morales is a scumbag through and through. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. Is it okay to just eradicate all images of white people? Are white victims somehow lesser, even if they're refugees, even if they did nothing wrong? Even when we see the video and it's absolutely heartbreaking, do they just not matter because they're white? Or maybe is the issue at hand that the criminal in this case was a black person, therefore the black person is actually the real victim, if you really think about it. If you really examine it, the guy who did the stabby stab and then said it was because she was a white person after, who wasn't even charged with a hate crime, isn't he the real victim of our society given multiple chances? I believe he had something like 20 arrests. Again, let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Providence, Rhode Island politicians showing their true colors. Till next time.